Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Know-How is brought to you by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This episode of Know-How is brought to you by iFixit. You can fix it, and iFixit makes it easy with free step-by-step repair guides, high-quality replacement parts, and all the tools that you'll ever need. For $10 off your purchase of $50 or more, go to ifixit.com/twit and enter the code KNOWHOW at checkout. And by IT Pro TV. Are you looking to upgrade your IT skills or prepare for certification? IT Pro TV offers engaging and informative tutorials streamed to your Roku computer or mobile device. For a free 7-day trial and 30% off the lifetime of your account, go to itpro.tv/knowhow and use the code KNOWHOW30. Today, lasers make metal better. Your questions are answers. Oh, and we're going to take a look at all your quadcopter questions. Know-How is next. Welcome to Know-How. It's the Twitch show where we build, bend, break, and upgrade. I'm Father Robert Balacer, the digital Jesuit, and I'm sorry Cranky Hippo is out today, or is he?
I was sitting in my bedroom with my laptop, and I was playing Titanfall.
Oh, exactly. See, he is here. It's the magic of science, folks. No, but seriously, Cranky Hippo is off on the East Coast doing some sort of secret mission for God knows who. But he'll be back next week. He's here in spirit. Actually, we've got a fill-in for Cranky Hippo. I'd like you to meet Cranky Patrick, and he will be playing the part of Cranky Hippo today. But before we get to that, we've got a little news item here. If you've ever used metal for building anything, you know that moisture is the enemy of metal because it makes it rust. Even if you've got corrosion-resistant metal, something like stainless steel with a very low carbon content, eventually, at some point, unless it's pure with absolutely no carbon, it's going to start to corrode. Now, it's very simple. Anytime you have an atmospheric condition that has moisture, you're going to start to get oxides. It's different for different types of metal. For example, aluminum, when you get aluminum rust, that's aluminum oxide, it will form a protective layer around the metal. That's why it's actually pretty good for corrosion. And it will not oxidize any further than that protective layer. The same thing goes for copper. But something like steel, it will continue through that until it rusts completely out. In fact, take a look at the red planet Mars. That's why it's red. It's actually rusted until everything has turned into some sort of oxide material. Now, in the past, we've used coatings. We've tried to keep the moisture out. Either some sort of chemical coating that bonds with the surface of the metal, or many of us use some sort of polymer in order to just block it out from the atmosphere. But if the chemical coating wears off, or if the protective layer gets breached, you have the same problem. But a researcher over in Rochester, New York, has figured out a way to use lasers to make metal hydrophobic. In other words, it's going to repel water. In fact, there's a very cool picture right there of the metal in action. What he's done is he's used intense, crazy intense, very short pulses of high-intensity lasers to change the structure of the surface of the metal. Alex, go ahead and play that video. The way it works is if you look at the surface of a very smooth metal under a microscope, you're going to see that the surface kind of looks chaotic, and that actually attracts the water, that attracts the moisture. But if you use this laser, pulse it a couple million times every femtosecond or so, you can make the surface of the metal structured, and as a structured surface, it will repel water. Now, there are some ridiculously cool applications for this. Imagine a metal that doesn't rust under any circumstance. Or imagine a car, a building, a plane that has a property that lets water roll right off of it. Or I'm thinking, what if you created a boat with a hull that was actually hydrophobic? You would actually reduce the friction because the water wouldn't have that surface tension that clings to the side of the boat and slows it down. The same thing goes for a plane. Even though this looks cool, even though I'd love to have material sciences that uses this, they do admit that there are a couple of problems that at the moment make it impractical. Now, to make this 1-inch square piece of metal hydrophobic, so that little piece that you're staring at in the video right now, it required about an hour of laser time, and that actually used more power than the entire North American grid uses at once. It takes a lot of power in order to do that. Now, they're working on that. They should be able to get the process down so that it uses a fraction of the amount of power, and they only have to pulse the laser once every couple of femtoseconds. But when they eventually do get that process down, let's just say it's going to be awesome. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the first segment of the show. We're going to be answering a couple of the questions that you've had in our Google Plus groups. We wanted to do this last week, but unfortunately we ran out of time. We were only able to cover about 2 or 3 different feedback items. I want to do a few more. I promised that we wouldn't do any quadcopter segments. We wouldn't do any builds until late February, but a lot of the questions in the groups have centered around quadcopters, so we're going to answer a few of them. The easiest one to do is about the Syma X5. We've been telling our audience that this is a great trainer, something to learn how to fly. In fact, Leo Laporte went ahead and bought one for himself, and we're going to be teaching him how to fly next week. But we've got a question from Jim Malley, and I'm going to go ahead and go to our Cranky Hippo stand-in. That's right. What do we call Cranky Patrick? I'm going to go to Cranky Patrick. And could you go ahead and tell us what Jim Malley wants?
Yeah, Jim said, so I got the Swan Quad Force video drone. Now I would like to get a few extra batteries for it. I remember Father Robert mentioning them one time, but I'm unable to find that info. Any help is greatly appreciated. Thanks.
Yeah, actually, this is a very good question because a lot of people have found out that the Quad Force, or the Syma X5, which is essentially the same quadcopter. Even though it's fun and incredibly easy to fly, the battery doesn't last you a whole lot of time. Most of us get between 5 and 8 minutes with the stock battery. You could get a replacement, but the question is where you're going to get it from. The first place I would recommend is a website called Bang Good. It's spelled just like it sounds, BANGGOOD. This is a 5-pack of 600 milliamp hour batteries plus a charger. Actually, Alex, if you go to the overhead, you'll see a little bit what it looks like. I've actually given away one of these. It's these blue batteries. These are incredibly inexpensive. One thing, and that is the charger. This little charging cable, not the highest grade design I've ever seen. It is a little bit on the janky side, and the included USB charger doesn't always work perfectly, but for $18 for a 5-pack, it ain't bad. If you've got the cash, I would actually recommend something like this. This is an upgrade package from Amazon. And again, I gave away one of these batteries. It comes with a much better charger. It can only charge 4 at a time, but these fit a little bit better into the bay. Now, any of these upgrade packets, when you go to 600 milliamp, you're probably going to have to remove the door off of your Syma or your Swan Quad Force. That's okay. You're actually reducing weight, and it's snug enough to fit in there, but you will kind of have to bend the bar on the battery bay for your quadcopter in order to make it fit. Now, go ahead and buy yourself a 4 or 5-pack because that means that you could always have one charging while you're flying, which means you could essentially fly indefinitely if you've got one of those little USB chargers. Patrick, what do we got next?
Benjamin wrote in, he said on episode 122, Padre was talking about using different channels when accessing the same SSID for multiple routers. My experience with multiple routers using the same SSID when router A and router B are on separate channel devices connected to router A can't see devices on router B. So separate channels didn't work when it came to sharing files. Therefore, if you don't want to share files over the network, then use the same channel. If you don't need to share files, then don't use the same channel.
Thanks, Patrick. This is actually a very good question. We get this a lot. I get a lot of emails about this. It's based on a misunderstanding of what channels are. There are a lot of people who think that when you say a channel, so I set my wireless AP for a specific channel, I'm creating a different network. That's absolutely not the case. The best way to think of channels is wireless cables. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with the network. In other words, if I set something for channel 1, it's not separate inherently from the network on channel 6 or separate from the network on channel 11. Those are all the same network as long as I set up the routers that are broadcasting those channels correctly. I understand what you're having, Benjamin. What it is you've actually natted your NAT. Yeah, let me explain what that means. If you go ahead and go back to my single, this is what a typical multi-router setup would look like. You've got the internet. You've got your router, which for most of you is also going to be your default router, your default gateway. And then you've got a couple of different APs, which for many of you is also going to be a router that you've turned off the routing function. The problem is that many people try to plug these in without turning off the NAT or without turning off the router function. I'll explain that in a little bit, but first, let me explain what a flat network is. When we look at something like this, we have what's called a routable address. That's the address that's facing the interweb. So, like for example, if you did a trace route on your network, we're gonna do an episode segment specifically on this so that you can go step by step. I'm just gonna give you the general overview right now. It would look like 68.78.2.5 or something like that. It means it's an address that can be reached in the real world. On the other side of the router, there's a non-network addressable address, and that would be something like 192.168.0.1. That means nothing to a computer out in the real world, but it means everything to a computer on the inside world. What we want for your home network is a network that's flat. It's all using that same IP address range. So for example, I could make this 192.168.10.x, and that x is any value between 1 and 254. What you want to do when you're planning out your network is you want to come up with an addressing scheme that will stay constant for your network. For example, the way that I typically do it is 192.168.10, I'm using 10.1 will be my gateway. That's the piece of equipment that's connected to the outside world. In other words, anytime a piece of equipment wants to connect to the internet, it has to go through that 192.168.10.1. I then reserve everything between 192.168.10.2 and 192.168.10.100 for what I will call system reserved servers. Between that will be the APs, let's say a sling box, let's say my consoles, anything that I want to give a static IP address to so that I will always know where it is. That includes network security cameras, that would include media servers, that would include my Plex box. Now, the nice thing about doing it that way is that you know that anytime you're going to have a server or an AP that you want to address, it's going to be in that lower reserved range. Okay, now the way that I reserve that range is that inside of my router, and again, we're going to be doing an in-depth episode on this, I have the option to set the range that my DHCP server in my default gateway will be handing off to any device that wants to connect to my network. And I can tell it only use 192.168.10.101 to 200. It means that those 100 addresses between 101 and 200 will be handed out automatically to devices that just want to connect wirelessly or wired. Here's the key. None of these AP1, AP2, AP3, which is probably just routers, again, with DHCP and NAT turned off, can be doing the same thing. And you need to be connected to the LAN port, not the WAN port of each of these routers. If you're connected to the WAN, what you're doing is you're actually segmenting off each of these connections from the name network. You're natting a NAT. That's no good. That's exactly what Benjamin did, and that's why he could not connect from devices connected from this AP to this AP to this AP. That's why it seemed as if those channels were different networks. Patrick, have you ever run into this problem?
Not that I recall, but my network's pretty simple.
Yeah. And normally it is simple unless you start adding more routers and more APs. Now, again, we're going to do this in depth, so if this kind of has you freaked out, no problem. But this is a general overview because we get this question all the time of how your wireless network is going to work. All right, that's enough network babble for now. Patrick, we're going back to quadcopters, right?
Yeah, Barry's got a big problem. His feet keep falling off. He writes, thanks to quad building episodes, I got the confidence to move up from toys, Hubsan and Sima, to a kit. I bought the FPV 250 kit that was featured on the show. my question is, what's a good way to attach the feet to the frame? I've tried CA, plastic epoxy, and hot glue. Nothing sticks. According to the frame description, it's made from nylon, and there's nothing much that will stick to nylon. What have you found that works?
This is actually a great question because we get this all the time. This is the 250 kit that I suggested, and these are the little nylon feet. In fact, if you go ahead and go to that close-up camera from, these things are always popping off. And I understand. We've suggested hot glue, we've suggested crazy glue, which is CA. Some people have used little screws that they countersink into the feet. Nothing seems to work. Now, the best solution I found out is to use something like these zip ties, and there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. But I always use it in collaboration with a little bit of glue. Go ahead and come back out to the the wide angle. This is actually key to it. If you use crazy glue, that's CA, this is kicker, which will allow the glue to set faster. This is key because the CA tends to just kind of stay liquidy around the feet, and you don't get a really good bond. You basically just create a layer of crud. If you use a little bit of kicker, it will set the glue that much faster. But even then, what people find out is that a hard hit will snap the connection between the glue and the surface of the feet, and then the next time you take off, the vibration makes it drop off. And the worst case scenario is that you're up in the air 100 feet and the foot drops off and it's gone. You have no idea where it could be, especially if you're flying over something like a lawn. Now, if you use these zip ties, and I get something like this. This is a, go ahead and go to the overhead. This is a jar of zip ties from Michael's. It's just a hobby store that I bought for something like $5 for this entire thing. I can get a bunch of different colors, but the key is that they're the smaller type of zip ties, and that keeps the weight down. Because I don't want to use a solution that's going to dramatically increase the amount of weight that I have to put on my quad. Go to the side view, and I'll show you a couple of different ways to do it. This is a standard, straight-up loop-through. So I'm using two different ties, and I'm essentially going underneath the mount, underneath the monitor, down through this part of the leg, back up on the other side. This is incredibly strong. I can do really hard hits, and it will keep the foot in. There's another way to do it, and that's sort of the double loop. This is using just two wire ties, but it takes both sides and goes down through the foot and back up. Some people prefer this method because they think it gives a bit more strength. I'm not sure about that, but it also comes down to looks. How do you want your foot to look? So I typically do a little bit of each. Other people have tried fishing line. That works just fine. Some people have used duct tape. I would very much suggest you not do that because duct tape will leave an adhesive mark that is very difficult to get out. And duct tape, honestly, after a lot of vibration, will just fall apart. So go ahead and try that. Another question that we've gotten in the chat room a lot is, where do I buy extra feet? Now, if I do lose the feet, where do I get them? Unfortunately, you don't. These are diatone frames. Now, the nice thing is diatone frames are very inexpensive. You could pick one up for about $8. And for $8, you will get a frame plus 4 of the feet. So what I would suggest is go ahead and buy 1 or 2 frames, because not only will it give you the extra feet, but it will also give you the frame. Something that Cranky Hippo has done is he's actually installed posts at the 4 corners of the frame. So he's gotten rid of the plastic feet, and now he has little metal frames, aluminum tubes that stick out and become his feet. So be imaginative. You don't have to use the nylon feet, but if you do, this is a really good way for you to make sure that they don't pop off. Now, Patrick, I'm going to go ahead and ask you if you could grab me the iFixit tools off my desk and bring them back here, because it's time for us to go ahead and take a pause to thank the first sponsor of this episode of Know How. Now, Alex, if you could go ahead and run that iFixit B-roll, you know them. iFixit is the place to go whenever you need something for makers, for DIYers. They're the one-stop shop to find that tool roll, that fantastic toolkit that gives you pretty much everything you need to modify, to work with, and to change the gear that you already have. But they're also not just about tools. They're also not just about that iFixit kit. They've also got repair guides, DIY guides, and pretty much the step-by-step instructions to open up the electronics that you want to open up. Now, this is the iFixit tool roll. You know it. You love it. You've seen it over and over on the Twit TV network, and we swear by it. Most of the projects that we use, especially the ones that we've been doing on quadcopters, are using some iFixit tools, either that magnetic project mat or definitely this tool roll, which includes all the bits that we need, all the little drivers, all the little specialty bits that you won't find anywhere else, and the tweezers, the spudgers, the things that get our electronics open up correctly. But that's not what all iFixit is all about. They've also got specific pieces to repair the devices that you know and you love. In fact, if you could go to the overhead, here are a couple of their new repair kits. This one is for a iPhone. If you want to replace the battery, they've now got a specific kit that will give you all the tools you need just for that repair. They've realized that some people don't want to buy the entire toolkit. They want to buy a specialty toolkit. And their specialty toolkits are just like this. They'll give you the drivers that you need to be able to open the case. They'll give you the spudgers so that you can open up the case without having to destroy the finish. And they'll give you little things like suction cups. Now, you could go out and buy each of these bits and pieces individually, and then sometimes you're going to make a mistake and have to rebuy the tool, or you could buy it from iFixit. And iFixit will not just give you the tools and the replacement parts, but they'll give you step-by-step instructions in order to do it right. Now, these kits come with all the tools that you need to fix it right away, which again would include the pentalobe drivers for proprietary screws, those spudgers, the replacement adhesives, and it's pro-grade replacement parts. Again, this is not the stuff that you find on eBay that maybe will kind of work, but maybe makes your case bulge out, or maybe kind of works but doesn't quite hold the charge. iFixit stands behind the replacement parts, and that's really what makes them different. iFixit offers the best tools and repair parts, and they have the best step-by-step guides to show you exactly how to fix the device you're working on. In fact, they have comprehensive repair guides for every single iPhone, iPad, Mac computer, plus a growing list of Android devices. And these repair guides are free, no purchase necessary. iFixit makes DIY fun, easy, and affordable. Now, here's what we want you to do. We know that you're geeks. We know that you're DIY freaks. We know that you're makers. So head on over to ifixit.com/twit for all the tools, parts, and kits that you'll need to fix all your broken stuff. Enter the code KNOWHOW at checkout, and you'll save $10 off any purchase of $50 or more. That's ifixit.com/twit, and use the code KNOWHOW at checkout. We thank iFixit for their support of know-how. I mean, isn't that right, Brian? Don't you love iFixit? Oh, Alex. Alex, you have failed me.
No, it's neat.
Thanks. After that little bit from Cranky Hippo, by the way, I'm doing that on purpose because, you know, he's Alex. We did want to take...
The show is out of control.
Thank you very much, again, from the Hippo. We wanted to take another stop by CES 2015, this time to take a look at some of the 3D printers from XYZ Printing. So without further ado, Alex, press that magic button. We've all seen 3D printing, but one of the missing elements has been making a 3D printer that works again and again and again. Well, that's a secret that the folks here at XYZ Printing have figured out. This printer right here, the Vinci 1.0, is the hottest selling 3D printer on the planet. And you can currently buy this at Amazon, unlike a lot of other kits where you have to find some esoteric shop. Now, they've went from the Vinci 1.0 to the Vinci 2.0, which is a duo printer. It has two different heads, to this one, which is internet connected. So for those people who don't really want to have to design things, you can go through the internet to find the design you want to print. Now, if that's all that they had, XYZ would still be tops in my book, especially at that price point and at this quality. But they're increasing the state of the 3D printing arts by using this. This is the DaVinci 1.0 AIO, the all-in-one. This is a 3D scanner. That means that for those people who really don't want to have to design their own objects, you can put something into the scanning bed, it will take all the measurements, convert it into a standard format, and then you can 3D print it. Now, here's the best part. You could use this 3D scanner to take an object that you want to improve, scan it, modify it. Like, let's say you wanted to add a handle or a mounting post and then print it up on a 3D printer. That's real innovation because it means I can take the objects from my daily life and make them that much better. Now, they're not just going to sit back on their laurels with a great 3D printer and a great 3D scanner. They've decided that they need something that everyone can afford, that everyone can use. They wanted to leverage the experience they have in being one of the biggest electronics manufacturing firms on the planet and give you a product that's durable, easy to use, and, well, cheap enough for you to buy. And that's what this is. This is the Vinci Junior. This is a $349 3D printer. Now, it's not just that it's inexpensive, it's that it's durable. It comes in its own case, so it's going to keep everything nice and clean, and the head is removable. If you ever jam, if you ever have a feed problem, you can actually remove the head from the assembly without having to disassemble the entire printer. That's entirely different than some of the 3D printers that we played with in the past. It also comes with a 1-year warranty. If you tried to buy a 1-year warranty on some of the other 3D printer bots, well, it would actually cost more than the DaVinci itself. Now, this is not just a $349 printer, it's a statement from XYZ saying, everybody come. Start with the DaVinci Junior. Start with the $349 printer. See if your hand is good at designing 3D objects. Then add a laser scanner. And if your skill progresses, why not go up to one of the big boys? Now, if you want to start in 3D art, you got to give a try to XYZ. We're back at the XYZ booth to show you off another piece of technology. Now, this is the Noble 1.0. It's a $1,499 printer. Now, you're probably saying, wait a minute, they had the DaVinci for $349 and they're larger printers for $600. Why would I want to pay $1,500 for this? Well, in a word, perfection. This is the granular kind of quality that you're going to get with this. And the reason why it does that is because it's a stereolithography machine. In other words, it doesn't use a print head. It's using a series of lasers and this resin. It's a photosensitive resin to create the image. It slowly lifts the head out of the resin and it adds layers and layers and layers to the item. The finished product is this. You can get extremely small articles. You can get super fine detail. And it just means that you're going to get a part that's far more tolerant of really close precision movement. This is a different type of 3D printing. This is not squirting plastic onto a platform or onto a head. This is actually building the article from the ground up with laser light. Now, if you are into more precise 3D printing, XYZ is making it cheap with the Noble. Now, 3D printing isn't all about utility. We know that. You've got to have the desire to create, the desire to build. And if you're a parent, you probably want your kids to have that desire. Well, XYZ is making it easier with this new series of robots. Now, imagine this. They sell you a kit that includes the servos and the controllers and the wiring and the chips that will allow you to create a robot. But then they give you the files to 3D print the frame, the structure, everything that turns the robot into a robot. This is a fantastic possibility for you to give your kids a love for learning. At $300 per pop, it means that they're going to learn everything from microcontrollers to servos to how structures move and work to 3D printing. And in the end, they get a finished package that is their customized master of disaster. Robots. And you thought 3D printing was only about plastic? Shame on you. Here at XYZ, they've also got the 3D food printer. Yeah, no, you heard me right. Food printer. Now take the same technology that you would use in a 3D printer with a head, but instead of squirting ABS plastic, it's squirting edibles. Now they've got cartridges for dough, they've got cartridges for chocolate, and you can have the most intricate patterns being piled up one on top of the other to create cookies beyond compare, to create sweets that are sweet, and just to geek out. Now, the thing that I really like about something like this is it's taking 3D printing into a space where we didn't think it was going to go. And isn't that what we want at CES? We want to be shown something that we haven't seen before. And if you're going to take a 3D printing technology that has grown over the last 3-4 years and give me something I can eat, well, I'm all for it. Here at XYZ, om nom nom. Over the years, I've come to realize that I do tech pretty well. Growing things, not so much. To say I have a black thumb would be an understatement. I kill everything that grows. Of course, maybe that won't be the case now that we've got XYZ and their green cube. This device is a self-contained hydroponics farm. Now, the only thing you have to do is add water and power. It will give your plant the right light, the right humidity, the right temperature, and make sure that it stays watered so that you get a customized growing profile. Oh, I know that this is a niche product. This is going to be something that some people are going to say, well, why do I need a hydroponics farm in my house? But for $399, why wouldn't you? Go ahead and give it a try. See what you can grow, what kind of herbs, what kind of vegetables, and maybe you can find a difference in taste. Now, I know some people swear by organic, and this is uber organic. This is organic grown in your living room. I wonder what else I could grow in the green cube. Oh, so subtle indeed. The folks over at XYZ Printing are going to be sending us a few care packages from CES. We actually do want to use their Vinci Junior. Again, the idea was to give you something that's affordable, something that can be can replicate the same thing over and over again. We wanted to do 3D printing on know-how way back, but we just couldn't decide on a 3D printer. They were too expensive, and the ones that were affordable just didn't work right enough times. I think we finally have a price point that most of you can afford and software that most of you can run. So this should be an exciting time for know-how. And also, I want XYZ to send me one of those green glowing cubes because, you know, why not? Now, when we come back, we're going to be jumping straight back into your feedback. We've got a lot more questions that we want to have answered. But before we do that, one of the things I get asked all the time is, well, how do I get into enterprise IT? It's actually the way that I got into the TWiT TV network. If you remember way back, this is more than 2 years ago, Leo Laporte asked me to come on this network because I did enterprise IT, and he wanted an enterprise IT show. It's kind of difficult to get into the game. I understand that. The language is kind of daunting, and you have to be exposed to millions and millions of dollars worth of equipment, and there's not really an apprenticeship that you can jump into unless you know someone in IT. So for many people who want to try out enterprise IT, it's just not really an option. Unless, of course, you check out IT Pro TV. Now, what is IT Pro TV? Think of it as TWiT for people who want to get into enterprise networking and enterprise class troubleshooting. It's a one-stop shop for you to find topics on everything from desktop security to how to set up servers to what you need in order to pass the certifications that you want to put on your profiles so that prospective employers know what you can and cannot do. Now, IT Pro TV offers you hundreds of hours of course material, 30 hours being added each and every single week. Their library includes video courses on Microsoft, Cisco, Apple, A+, CCNA, Security+, MCSA, CISSP, PowerShell, and Linux+. They cover those topics with aplomb. In other words, they have experts, people who have actually done this in the field. These are not just textbook learners. These are people who know what does and does not work in the field. The shows are streamed live and are available on demand worldwide to your Roku, your computer, and your mobile device, Chromecast too. And you can interact with hosts during the show and topic-specific web-based Q&As. If this sounds familiar, if this sounds a little bit like TWiT, that's because they're fans of TWiT TV. That's right, the folks over at IT Pro TV use the same TriCaster, the same cameras, the same teaching methodologies as we do because they love what Leo Laporte has created. So if you know TWiT, if you learn from TWiT, you'll be able to learn from IT Pro TV. I know there's going to be some of you out there who are saying, but I've already started a certification course, or maybe I'm following a book. That's fine. Even if you're already studying with a book or enrolled in a certification class, this is a fantastic way to supplement all the things that you're already learning. Plus, you'll be able to progress at your own pace. They include measure-up practice exams so that you can see where you are and if you are ready to take the certification exam. And my personal favorite is the virtual sandbox that you get with your subscription. That gives you hands-on practice. You get to take a look at the interface, again, for those millions of dollars worth of equipment that you just can't buy on your own. You get this all for one low monthly price, which includes daily updates and new features monthly. It's comparable to the cost of a study guide and much cheaper than going to an IT boot camp. So here's what we want you to do. If you're even a tiny bit curious if the world of IT might be for you, check out itpro.tv/knowhow to upgrade your brain with the most popular IT certifications recognized by employers. You're going to get a free 7-day trial when you sign up using our offer code, which will allow you to check out their courses, their live stream, and more. Subscriptions are normally $57 per month or $570 for the entire year, but we've got a special offer because they're fans of Twit. If you sign up now and use the code KNOWHOW30, you'll receive 30% off your subscription for the lifetime of your account. That's less than $40 per month or $3.99 for the entire year. And once you reach your 13th month, they'll reduce your subscription rate even further, bringing your cost down to $24.95 per month or $249 for the entire year. That's itpro.tv/knowhow, itpro.tv/knowhow, and use the code KNOWHOW30 to try it free for 7 days and save 30%. And we thank itpro.tv for their support of Know-How. Let's get back into it. We've got a little bit more time. Let's go ahead and answer some more of your questions. Hey, Cranky Patrick, what's next?
We got a message from 610 Bob who asks, so I have some server motherboards and other computer components that need to be properly stored. Because they are backup parts for servers at my parents' company that I work at, I don't want to just throw them in a drawer with only an anti-static bag to protect them. Any suggestions?
Oh, first of all, 610 Bob, kudos to you. This is actually a problem that a lot of people have expressed. I think this exact same question has been asked 3 times in the Google Plus group in the last 6 weeks, and I probably get one email every week saying something along the same lines, which is, I bought 3 of X part because I need to be able to use this for the next 5 years, and I'm not going to be able to buy a replacement part in the next 18 months. So kudos to you for thinking ahead when you've got a dedicated platform, something that you're not really worried about performance but longevity. It always helps to buy some spare parts when you first start out. Now, I'm going to tell you something that goes up a bit beyond the scope of your question, but if you're going to do this, like for example, when I buy server motherboards, you have to test all the server motherboards before you put them into storage. There's nothing quite like getting a backup and then finding out 3 years from now, when the warranty's dead, that the backup actually came DOA. So test it before you store it. But now let's go ahead and talk about storage. In your post, you talked about using Ziploc bags. I use Ziploc bags for non-static sensitive components, but if it's at all static sensitive, and that means if it's got a chip in it, don't use a Ziploc bag. They're not great static collectors, but they can conduct static electricity, and that's a bad thing. In fact, you're much better off using something like this. This is a standard anti-stat bag. Just go online. You can buy so much of this. It will have this nice mylar coating, which essentially keeps all the static electricity on the outside of the bag. It's not going to conduct through. Plus, get a few sheets of this nice soft foam. Whatever component you're gonna put, either a motherboard or let's say video cards, network cards, go ahead and stick it on this surface first so that it's not gonna have those pointy edges poking through the bag, and then put it into your anti-stat bag. Once it's in there, seal it, and you've got your first layer of protection. And that first layer of protection is not protecting it from impact, it's just gonna protect it from getting fried by a static discharge. Now, this is not enough. Don't take this and drop it into a drawer because, again, you're going to forget what it is. And if you're planning to have this for multiple years, you're probably going to start piling stuff on top of it, and that's just going to break it, which means you need something like this. This is a sample container. This is nice and easy. I think we got these for like $10 for 4 of them. They're not that expensive. But the nice thing about it is that you can put several sets of components inside of them. So for example, I've got one downstairs that actually stacks up 5 motherboards. On those motherboards, I have labeled exactly what they are. But once you've got them all stacked up, you can put the cover on it and you can seal it, and you can now put this on, say, a baker's rack, along with a label here saying motherboards. This is going to keep it completely safe. It doesn't matter what hits this case, unless it actually cracks through the plastic, you're going to have a nice impact-proof module for the future. One of the things that I'll actually do is I will waste space inside the box, and I will say, okay, this is for server 5, and it'll have the 2 motherboards, it'll have the 4 network cards, and maybe some replacement memories. That's just my way of organizing. There's one last bit that you may want to consider, and this is really good for you, you equipment nerds who have a lot of equipment that you purchase. Most of those boxes come with this. If you go ahead and go to the overhead, Alex, this is a pack of desiccant. You're going to see this. This is the stuff that says silicone gel, do not eat. Now, all this is a bead that pulls moisture out of the air. In fact, each of these beads can pull 40% of their own weight of moisture out of the air. Unfortunately, though I collect these all the time, they kind of die, but you can recharge them. All you have to do is take these, save these, put it on a baking sheet lined with aluminum foil, and put it into an oven at 275 degrees. Put it there for 60 minutes for every 30 ounces of the silica gel. What that will do is it will bake the moisture back out of those little beads so that when you put it into your equipment box, it's fresh, it's brand new. So if you get a lot of these, go ahead and save them up because they're always useful. Patrick, what else do we got?
Lee says, after I get comfortable with the SEMA, I'd like to use a quadcopter for image acquisition. Unless I've missed it, you haven't talked much about the best build, including the best camera for that use case. If you have talked about it, can you point me to the appropriate episode?
Very good question. We haven't talked about this because it's actually one of our more advanced builds. Now remember, we told our audience that we were going to hold off on more quadcopter builds until all our late February episodes, and we're going to stick to that promise. But I can't answer your question. When we talk about cameras, there's really 2 cameras that people think of when they're thinking of quadcopters. The first is the ever-popular GoPro. These things are ubiquitous. They have great video quality, and you know, there's accessories galore for them. A lot of people, especially if you're going to fly something like the 250 class, will fly caseless. Which is nice because it means you don't have the weight of the case. On the other side, it's very easy to damage the camera. If you crash and it's got no case, the worst possible thing that could happen is you scratch the lens. And if you scratch the lens on a GoPro, you're basically out of the game. I'm sticking to the Hero 3 series because that's less expensive. You can get a silver for about $200. You can get a black for somewhere in the range of $400. They've now got the GoPro 4s, but those are ridiculously expensive. So unless you're planning on shooting really high quality 4K video, stick to the 3 series. The other option is this, and again, we're going to talk about this more in depth when we get to actually creating a video-bound quadcopter, but this is the Mobius. This is the wide-angle version. This camera costs about $80, so it's at least, 40% the cost of even the lowest range GoPro 3. It's not quite as good quality. In fact, you're going to have to do a lot of color correction. And again, I'll explain this when we get to the segment on doing video on a quadcopter. This tends to blue shift everything. So you have to color correct. You have to add the red and the green back into the video for it to look right. But at $80, you could crash this a couple of times without worrying about destroying it like this. And it's also lighter than a GoPro, which means you're going to get a little better performance. Now, those are the cameras. Let's go ahead and talk about the craft. Alex, go ahead and go to my overhead. This one right here, this big mamma jamma, this is a 450 class. You've seen this before. This is called a dead cat frame. As you can, go ahead and go to my wide, actually. I'll hold it up like this. It looks a little strange. That's because the arms are kind of splayed out. That's why they call it a dead cat or an ex-alien frame. The nice thing about this is the camera will be out of the range of the propellers. On a lot of the other quadcopter builds, the props are so close to the center that there's really no good way for you to get out of the range. It'll always be in your frame. Now, the other thing that's nice about this is this particular frame has what's called a clean and dirty plate. There we go. This little thing is actually mounted on rubber grommets. So as the quadcopter shakes, it's not going to translate all that vibration over to the camera. That's a really good way to get steady video. You still get a little bit of jello effect, but not nearly as much. You can also get a dedicated gimbal that would mount underneath the surface of this. I've actually used this for my shots in Hawaii. It's absolutely gorgeous. Now, the 450 is not the only way to get good video. You can actually do it with a 250 class and something like this. This is the extended frame on the 250. If this goes on top, this gives you a long frame for you to mount your FPV and your video gear on a 250. Get decent photos, not nearly as steady as a 450, but far higher performance. So yeah, there we go. Here, I do want to do a few things before we have to go, and we do have to go. The first one is a question I get a lot about the CMAs. And again, I know that a lot of you bought these on our recommendation, so thank you very much. Here's a question that many of you have. This one's broken, so it's not going to fly, but a lot of you are saying, I got a CMA, it flew a couple of times, but now it tends to flip over, or it won't fly straight, or it flies a little bit and then it wobbles out of control. There's a very easy way to fix it before you try to return it. What you have to do is you have to reset the flight controller to know what level is. And here's the procedure. If you go ahead and go to the overhead, Alex, what we want to do first is we're going to turn on our controller, right? So it's going to go do that. Now we turn on the quadcopter, and as you see, it's going to do the flash, the flash. Wait till it goes slow, sync it up. Now take both sticks and go down and to the right. And it's going to fast flash. That fast flash means that whatever level you've got that quadcopter on, it's going to set that as the level for the flight controller. Now again, this one won't work because this has one dead motor, but my quadcopter now knows what's level. So if you've got an X5 and it's flying a little funny, go ahead and set all the trims back to the center, you know, these little controls, and go ahead and re-level your quad. And hopefully, if you don't move it while it's calibrating, it will give you a level and fix your little drift problem. So that's an easy one. One last bit before we go. Some people have been asking about electronics builds, and like, for example, do I always use batteries? What do I use to supply power? In the past, I've shown you that I go ahead and I use old power supplies from computers in order to give me a 5 and a 12 volt rail. Now, for most projects, that works just fine because 5 and 12 volts are the voltages that I will need most often. But there are some other projects that I want to have adjustable. I'm going to go under the table here. I want adjustable power, and I've been using this. This is a nice, cheap power supply that I bought off of Amazon. This is actually called the Tech Power HY. Believe it or not, this was used for tattoo machines. Alex, go ahead and go to the side view here. The cool thing about this is it was only about $35 shipped on Amazon. And if I turn this thing on, it's got a knob here that will allow me to adjust exactly the amount of voltage that I need in order to run my electronics. And I can go all the way down from 1.2 volts all the way up to 15.1 volts. This is a fantastic piece of gear to have. It only gives you 2 amps, so you're not going to be able to run your quadcopter motors. But for example, if you wanted to light up LEDs to find out what color they are, or if you wanted to light up your flight controller without having to plug in a battery because you're worried about shorting, this is a really good way. All you have to do is find the exact voltage that you need. For example, it's a 5-volt device. I use banana clips to plug it in here, and you've got yourself a fantastic way to give yourself variable voltage. There you go, $35 shipped. Go ahead and pick one up. You could get more professional models that can provide multiple amps, way more than 2. But for most cases, a 2 amp power supply is going to be just fine. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this episode of Know How. Brian will be back next week, but we didn't really miss him. I mean, Brian, aren't you happy to be gone for a while?
No, it's neat.
Yeah, exactly. Patrick, thank you very much for filling in for Cranky Hippo. Could you please tell the folks at home where they could find you?
The latest project is backtothepredictions.com. It's comparing Back to the Future's 2015 with reality of 2015. And Microsoft WordLens, or Hololens, is the latest thing that I've posted.
Fantastic. Yeah, actually, yeah, wasn't that technology used to show Jaws in 3D?
No, this is what they were wearing at the dinner table.
Oh, right.
And it looks exactly like it. Yeah, here's Marty wearing the Microsoft HoloLens.
I wanted to cover this technology today because, of course, there was that big announcement yesterday, but I wanted to wait for Brian to get back because I have a feeling we're going to be able to banter about this quite a bit. It's enhanced reality. It's augmented reality, but they project the images on your retinas, not on screens, which that's just dang cool. Now, folks, don't forget that you can also get all the information about this episode by going to our show page at twit.tv/KH. If you drop there, you'll be able to get all of our back episodes, all of our show notes, but you'll also be able to get a drop-down menu where you can subscribe. So every episode of Know How automatically ends up in your device of choice, whether it be your iPhone, your iPad, your computer, laptop, desktop, Android device, whatever it's going to be, we give you a format that works best for you. Don't forget to follow us on our Google Plus group. Just go to Google Plus and look for Know How. We're a very popular group. We're a very active group. I love what you folks are doing in there. Brian and I are always jumping in, and what we find out is that 90% of the times, questions are answered before we get in there. It's a great place for DIYers. It's a great place for makers. So go ahead and join up. We're almost at 8,000.
They've had a few successful tests, but this is cool.
Thank you, Brian. See, we get thumbs up from the Cranky Hippo. Also, don't forget that you can follow both of us on Twitter. You can find him, that guy. Yeah, you can find him at Cranky Hippo. That's twitter.com/cranky_hippo. You can find me at twitter.com/PadreSJ. If you go ahead and follow us, you'll find out what we're going to be doing every week on Know How, as well as the other shows that we have here on the Twit TV network. And also special thanks to our TD Alex. He never puts a camera on himself, but Alex, if oh, there we go. Could you say a few words and, no. Okay, well, could you make Brian say a few words?
The show is out of control.
I was just going to stay there. No, that's what we do. That's how we do it. Next week, we're going to be showing you off a couple of projects that you've asked to see. We're going to show you how to document your bad connection, and I'm going to give you a couple of tips on setting up your own home studio. Until then, I'm Father Robert Balasier, and he's...
Like some of those places out at the coast, there isn't a Wi-Fi connection that you can connect to.
Exactly. And until next time, now that you know how, go do it. Because remember, Cranky Hippo always says...
I don't know, I think they've had a few successful tests, but this is cool.